Have you ever heard of a weapon so small, so unassuming, that its very existence seemed laughable compared to the mighty war machines of World War II? A vessel so tiny that most admirals dismissed it as a mere nuisance, until it began striking with the precision of a knife in the dark. These were America's PT boats, the little predators of the Pacific, that crept out of the shadows and left the Japanese Navy stunned, humiliated, and scrambling for answers. World War II was a conflict defined by giants. Battleships weighing tens of thousands of tons, aircraft carriers capable of unleashing entire squadrons into the sky, submarines prowling deep beneath the waves. Against such titans, a wooden torpedo boat barely 80 feet long and made for speed seemed insignificant. But that insignificance was exactly what made it deadly. The Japanese expected battles on a grand scale, clashes of fleets, aircraft duels, island invasions. They did not expect to be hunted by fast, darting shadows that appeared out of nowhere under the cover of night. The PT boats, short for patrol torpedo boats, were America's secret answer to fighting a superior navy without always needing a superior ship. They carried no heavy armor, no massive guns, nothing that could withstand a direct hit from a destroyer or cruiser. Instead, they relied on three things: speed, surprise, and the sheer audacity of the men who crewed them. Imagine a craft so fast it could dance on the water at over 40 knots, so small it could vanish in the ocean spray, yet armed with torpedoes capable of sending a warship to the bottom. That was the paradox of the PT boat. For the Japanese, their first encounters with these strange little attackers were nothing short of shocking. Picture a calm Pacific night. A convoy of Japanese supply ships makes its way through dark waters, guarded by a destroyer bristling with guns. Suddenly, out of the moonlit haze, faint engine roars cut through the waves. Before anyone can fully react, sleek silhouettes streak across the water, weaving, darting, closing in with reckless speed. Flashes of fire erupt, torpedoes launched from mere wooden boats. And in seconds, explosions rip through the convoy. Ships reel, alarms sound, men shout in panic. And just as quickly as the attackers appeared, they are gone, swallowed again by the night. To the Japanese sailors, it felt like being hunted by ghosts. These weren't submarines, hidden under the waves. They weren't aircraft, swooping from the skies. These were shadows on the surface, faster than anything they could track, striking and vanishing before retaliation could land a blow. It was maddening, but to truly understand why the PT boats stunned the Japanese, we have to step back and see the wider picture of the Pacific War. By 1942, Japan had spread its empire across vast stretches of ocean. From the Philippines to the Solomons, from New Guinea to the Central Pacific, their navy was the master of the seas. They relied on supply lines to maintain these far-flung garrisons, and every convoy that steamed through the Pacific was a lifeline. Yet, the US Navy, still recovering from Pearl Harbor, couldn't match Japan ship for ship everywhere at once. The PT boats became the perfect answer. Small enough to slip into island bases, cheap enough to produce in large numbers, and fast enough to attack convoys without requiring full fleet support, they became a thorn in Japan's side. What made them so fascinating was not just the technology, but the men. Crews were often barely out of their teens, young, daring, and willing to risk everything. They joked about their boats being plywood wonders, since the thin wooden hulls could be torn apart by a single shell. Yet that same lightness gave them incredible speed and maneuverability. In their hands, the Pacific became a chessboard, and they were the knights, always moving unpredictably, always threatening to strike from angles no one expected. For Japan, these boats became a symbol of frustration. A destroyer that cost millions to build could be forced into retreat by a handful of young men on a craft worth a fraction of the price. Convoys that once felt safe under the guns of escort ships suddenly became vulnerable. Imagine the humiliation. An empire built on the might of its navy being disrupted by wooden boats bristling with torpedoes. And yet, the true genius of the PT boat campaign wasn't just in the damage they inflicted. It was in the fear they created. Japanese captains began altering their routes, avoiding certain passages, slowing down supply chains. The mere possibility of PT boats lurking in the shadows forced them to change strategy. In war, fear can be as powerful as firepower, and the PT boats mastered both. But this was only the beginning. Because soon, the PT boats weren't just hitting supply lines. They were playing cat and mouse with destroyers, ambushing cruisers, and even daring to confront entire task forces. Every success fueled their legend. Every strike deepened Japan's frustration. And every night they prowled, the Pacific grew darker for the men of the rising sun. Yet behind the daring raids and explosions was a simple truth. The men aboard these boats knew they were gambling with death. One lucky shell, one burst of machine gun fire, could tear them to pieces. They had no armor to protect them, no large crew to absorb losses. They lived by their wits, their speed, and the element of surprise. And they knew the ocean could swallow them just as quickly as the enemy's guns. Still, they pressed on. And as word of their victories spread, the Japanese Navy began to realize that America's smallest weapon had become one of its most terrifying. But what happened when the Japanese finally tried to hunt him down? What was it like when destroyers and aircraft turned their full attention to wiping these little shadows from the sea? The answer would test not only the boats, but the very courage of the men who dared to sail them. The silence after October 9, 1943, was deafening. For the families of the USS Wahoo's crew, every passing day without word brought heavier dread. Wives clutched letters that had arrived weeks earlier, parents prayed for telegrams that never came, and children waited for fathers who would not return. To them, silence was the cruelest weapon of war. The Navy could offer no answers. The Wahoo was simply gone. At first, there was hope. Sometimes submarines returned late, their radios damaged or their routes delayed. Some thought that Wahoo would surface triumphantly, battered but alive, like so many times before. But as days stretched into weeks, hope turned to heartbreak. By the end of 1943, the Wahoo was officially listed as lost with all hands, 79 men who had sailed into the Sea of Japan and never come back. For decades, the mystery deepened. No wreckage was found, no survivors, no confirmed eyewitnesses. Theories grew like shadows. Some believed the submarine had struck a mine in the narrow straits on her way home. Others argued she had been cornered by Japanese escorts and destroyed by depth charges. There were even whispers of tragic accidents, mechanical failure, or torpedo misfires. But without evidence, the truth remained buried beneath the waves. What was certain was that the Japanese Navy had been on alert. Their records, discovered years later, revealed that aircraft and patrols had reported sighting and attacking a submarine in the Sea of Japan around the time Wahoo went missing. One report described a submarine surfacing under air attack, only to be struck by bombs and forced back under, leaving behind an oil slick. Another claimed that depth charges had finished the job, silencing the intruder forever. These accounts, while chilling, matched too closely to the Wahoo's last known patrol to be ignored. And yet, even in loss, the legend of the Wahoo grew. Veterans spoke her name with reverence, remembering her daring patrols and the fearless command of Mush Morton. Young sailors heard her story and felt pride in following the path of men who had fought so boldly. The submarine that vanished had not been forgotten, she had become immortal in memory. For years, explorers and historians longed to solve the riddle. Where had she gone down? Could her final resting place ever be found? The Pacific, vast and merciless, guarded its secrets well. And so the decades slipped by, the world changed, and generations passed. But the name Wahoo still stirred hearts. Then, in 2006, more than 60 years after her disappearance, there was a breakthrough. Off the coast of northern Japan, divers and surveyors exploring the waters near La Perouse Strait discovered a wreck lying silently on the seabed. The hull was shattered, scarred by explosions. The number etched into the metal, though worn by time, was unmistakable. The USS Wahoo had been found.